You think Vikings were hard to kill because they were strong. That's not why. They were hard to kill because they were already surviving something worse. Before the raids, before the battles, their lives were brutal. Freezing winters that lasted most of the year. Crops that failed without warning. Hunger that didn't care who you were. In Scandinavia, nature was the first enemy, and it never stopped. So every Viking learned early, endure or die. There were no easy days, no safety net. If your harvest failed, you didn't struggle, you starved. If winter came early, you didn't adapt, you froze. And that kind of life does something to people. It strips away comfort. It removes hesitation. It teaches you to keep going, even when everything tells you to stop. Not warriors, survivors. And that changes everything, because when someone like that steps onto a battlefield, fear doesn't hit the same. Pain doesn't stop them the same. And death, it's not new. They've already lived with it, seen it, expected it. So when kingdoms faced them, they weren't just fighting men. They were fighting people who had already adapted to suffering. But here's what made it worse. Vikings didn't just survive. They could switch. A farmer becomes a warrior. A trader becomes a raider. A father becomes a fighter. No warning, no transformation, just a shift. One season, you're working the land. The next, you're crossing the sea. And that unpredictability, that's what broke armies. Because how do you prepare for an enemy that doesn't live like you? That doesn't think like you? That doesn't need what you need? Comfort didn't control them. Routine didn't define them. Stability didn't protect them. They were used to losing everything and continuing anyway. So when they arrived on foreign shores, they weren't desperate. They were ready to take what they needed, ready to adapt to whatever came next, ready to keep going longer than anyone else. But there's something even deeper. Vikings didn't fear death the same way, not because they wanted to die, but because their world made peace with it. Stories of Valhalla, of warriors welcomed after battle, of death, not as an end, but a continuation. And when you remove the fear of death, you remove the greatest weapon your enemy has. Because most armies don't lose when they're defeated. They lose when they break, when fear spreads, when survival becomes more important than victory. But Vikings, they were already living on that edge. So they didn't break the same way. And that's when fear changes sides. Because now, it's not them fearing you, it's you fearing them. And by the time kingdoms understood this, it was already too late. Because the Vikings didn't just bring weapons. They brought a mindset, a way of living that made them harder to stop, to predict, and to kill. Vikings weren't built for war. They were built for survival. And war was just where that became unstoppable.